When my daughter-in-law told me I'd stayed long enough, I didn't say a word. I simply smiled, not because I wasn't hurt, but because I didn't trust my voice not to tremble. There was a long pause between us, the kind that makes the air feel heavy. She stood near the kitchen doorway, her hands still wet from washing dishes. Her tone wasn't cruel, not even loud, just tired, like she had rehearsed that sentence in her head many times before saying it aloud. "You've stayed long enough, Mama," she said again. Her eyes wouldn't meet mine. She just wiped her hands on the dish towel and walked away. I stood there for a while, trying to understand if I had misheard her. Maybe she meant something else. Maybe she was worried I was overworking myself, that I needed rest. But deep down I knew. It wasn't about the dishes or the laundry or anything small. It was about me, my presence, my existence in this home that no longer felt like mine. I looked around the kitchen, at the small wooden clock ticking quietly above the fridge, the half-empty teacup I had left on the counter, and the faint smell of cardamom and fried onions still hanging in the air. I remembered how this very kitchen used to be filled with laughter. When my son, David, was a little boy, he would sit on that counter, kicking his legs and stealing bites of dough before dinner. I used to chase him around with a spoon, pretending to be angry but laughing so hard I'd forget what I was cooking. Now the same walls felt like strangers, familiar but distant. That night, I went to my room, sat on the edge of the bed, and folded my hands. The house was quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the occasional sound of a car passing by outside. I tried to pray, but all that came out were tears. It wasn't always like this. There was a time when this house felt like a blessing, a new beginning. After my husband passed away, my son insisted that I come live with him and his wife. He said, "Mama, you've spent your whole life taking care of everyone. Let me take care of you now." And at that time, it felt like the most beautiful thing anyone had ever said to me. I remember the day I moved in. They had just bought the house, a small, cozy place with light yellow curtains and a garden full of marigolds. My daughter-in-law, Emily, greeted me with a hug and said, "Welcome home, Mama." She called me Mama, and I felt my heart fill with hope. For the first few months, everything was wonderful. We cooked together. She'd ask me for recipes, and I'd tell her the small secrets my mother once told me: how to make rice fluffy, how to tell when lentils were perfectly cooked. In the evenings, we'd sit in the living room and drink tea while David talked about work. I would knit, they would laugh, and I felt like life had given me another chance at family. But slowly, something changed. Not suddenly, but like a slow shift of light that you only notice when the room has already gone dark. Emily began to do things differently. She didn't want me to help in the kitchen anymore. At first, she said, "Mama, please rest. You've done enough for everyone." It sounded kind, and I believed her. But over time, it began to sound like, "Mama, please don't interfere." I told myself she was just adjusting, that every woman wants her own rhythm in her home. I remembered how, when I first got married, I too wanted to do things my own way. How I rearranged the spices and repainted the kitchen walls because I wanted to feel like it was my space. So I tried to give her the same space, even if it meant sitting quietly while she cooked, even when I saw her add too much salt or forget to wash the rice properly. But silence can be heavy. And mine began to weigh on me. Some days, when David came home from work, I would wait for him in the living room just to ask how his day was. He'd hug me, smile quickly, and say, "It was good, Mama. I'm just tired." Then he would go straight to their room. I noticed how the laughter between them started to happen behind closed doors. They still loved me. I'm sure of that, but love sometimes hides itself when it's afraid of conflict. There were moments when I caught Emily looking at me as though she was carrying an invisible burden, like she wanted to say something but couldn't. And in those moments, I wished I could tell her that I wasn't trying to take anything from her. Not her husband, not her home, not her way of doing things. I just wanted to belong somewhere. I used to spend my mornings watering the plants outside, the marigolds, the mint, and a small lemon tree that was struggling to grow. The garden became my peace. Each leaf, each flower, reminded me that even after being uprooted, life could still find a way to bloom again. Sometimes the neighbor's little girl, Mia, would stop by and wave at me. She'd say, "Grandma, can I help you water the flowers?" And I'd hand her the small watering can, pretending she was doing the most important job in the world. Those were my happiest moments, the kind that made me forget how quiet the rest of my days had become. But I began to sense that Emily was growing uneasy. I could feel it in the small things, the way she stopped leaving her laundry in the basket when I started folding it, or how she'd quickly take over the kitchen when I began to cook. Once, when I made her favorite lentil soup, she smiled politely and said, "Thank you, Mama." But I could see she was uncomfortable. That night, I overheard them talking in their room. David said softly, "She just wants to help." And Emily replied, "I know, but it doesn't feel like our home anymore." Her words cut deeper than I expected. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, wondering how a place could stop feeling like home when the same walls still stood around you. I told myself it was just stress, that things would pass. But sometimes, no matter how much you hope, life doesn't go back to how it was. It just changes. And you have to find a way to live inside that change. Then came that morning, the one I'll never forget. It was early, and I was making tea. The house was quiet, the sun just beginning to pour through the curtains. Emily walked in, her face calm but distant. She took a deep breath, then said those words that still echo in my heart. "You've stayed long enough, Mama." I wanted to ask, stayed long enough for what? For love? For family? For belonging? But I didn't ask. I just stood there, feeling a strange stillness wash over me. It wasn't anger or shock. It was something else, something heavier. It was the quiet understanding that maybe I had overstayed my welcome in the place that used to be my home. When she left the kitchen, I looked at the small cup of tea I had just poured for her. The steam still rose from it, curling softly into the air. I sat down, cupped the mug in my hands, and let the warmth settle against my palms. And for the first time in many years, I felt truly alone. After that conversation with Emma about wanting her own space, I started noticing small changes around the house. Nothing loud or dramatic, and just quiet shifts, the kind of things you only notice when you love a place deeply. My favorite chair, the one by the window where I used to sit and knit, was moved to the corner of the garage. When I asked, Emma smiled politely and said, "Oh, Mom, I thought you'd like more sunlight in your room instead." I nodded. Because what else could I do? It was her home now, or so I told myself. At dinner, the table felt different too. They used to ask about my day, about my garden, or how I used to make bread from scratch when my husband was alive. But now, meals were quieter. Emma talked about her online business, and Daniel mostly listened. Sometimes he'd glance at me and smile, but it was a small, tired smile, the kind that tries to keep peace. I didn't want to be a burden. I wanted to help, to earn my place there. So I cleaned the kitchen every morning before they woke up. I folded their laundry, cooked dinner early, even organized the pantry. But one evening, Emma came home, saw the kitchen spotless, and sighed. "Mom," she said softly, "you really don't have to do all this." I actually like keeping things my way. Her words weren't cruel, but they stung. It was like she was telling me, without saying it directly, "This isn't your space to fix." That night, I sat in my room, the small guest room they'd given me, and stared at the window. The moonlight fell gently across the old photo frame I kept beside the bed, my husband holding Daniel as a boy. He looked just like his father back then, I whispered to the photo. "I think he's trying his best, love." But things are different now. Over the next few weeks, the distance grew. Not because anyone was cruel, but because silence started taking more space than words. Emma began working late. Daniel seemed caught in between, his wife and his mother. He'd come to my door sometimes and ask, "Mom, you okay? Need anything?" And I'd always smile and say, "No, dear, I'm fine." But I wasn't. Because what do you do when the place that used to feel like home suddenly feels like a guest house? I started eating dinner early, just to avoid the awkward silence at the table. I'd make myself tea and sit quietly, watching the sunset from the porch. The light would turn golden, the neighborhood kids would laugh in the distance, and I'd pretend that was enough. One Sunday morning, I overheard Emma talking to her friend on the phone. Her voice was soft but sharp. "Yes, it's been hard having her here. I just need my own routine back." She means well, but it's too much. I stood in the hallway, frozen. The kettle in my hand felt heavy. I didn't hear the rest. My ears just rang with that one sentence. It's too much. I thought I was helping. I thought I was giving love. But somehow, I'd become a weight. That evening, when Daniel and Emma came home, I smiled. I cooked their favorite dinner, roasted chicken and mashed potatoes, just like I used to make when Daniel was a boy. I even lit a candle in the center of the table. When Emma complimented the meal, I said softly, "I just wanted to do something nice before I take a little break." Her fork paused. "Break?" she asked. I nodded. "Yes, dear. I think I'll visit my sister for a while. She's been asking me to come stay." Daniel looked surprised. "Mom, you don't have to do that." "I know," I said with a smile. "But maybe it'll be good for everyone." Inside, my heart ached. But I'd made up my mind. That night I packed quietly, just a small suitcase, some clothes, my knitting, and the photo of my husband. As I zipped the bag, I felt both light and hollow. When I walked out to the porch, I whispered to the night, "Sometimes leaving is the only way to stay in someone's heart." The morning I decided to leave, the sky was pale and quiet, the kind of stillness that feels like it's holding its breath. I woke up before dawn, as I always did. The house was silent except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the wall clock. I sat on the edge of my bed, holding the small photo frame in my lap, the one of my late husband and Daniel as a little boy. For a long time, I just traced their faces with my thumb. I whispered, "You'd know what to do, wouldn't you? You'd tell me how to stay without feeling unwanted." The sunlight began to stretch across the floor, slow and golden. I took one deep breath and stood up. By the time Daniel came into the kitchen, I had already packed my things and brewed coffee. He looked at me with sleepy eyes, confused. "Mom, why are your bags out?" I smiled gently, pouring him a cup. "Oh, don't look so worried, dear. I'm just going to visit my sister for a while. It's been years since I saw her." He frowned. "You didn't say anything last night." "I didn't want to worry you," I said. "You have so much on your plate already." He sat down at the table, rubbing his temples. "Mom, did Emma say something?" I shook my head, though my chest tightened. No, it's not that. I think it's time I give you both a little space." He looked down at his coffee. I could see his struggle, the part of him that wanted to insist I stay, and the part that understood the tension in the air. When Emma came into the kitchen, she stopped for a second when she saw the suitcase. Her face froze, then softened. "Oh, you're leaving?" she asked quietly. I nodded. "Just for a while. You've been working so hard, dear. I think a little space might do us all some good." She hesitated, then gave a small, polite smile. "That's very thoughtful of you. I hope you have a nice time." Her voice was gentle, but it carried relief, even if she didn't mean for it to. And that's when I knew I was doing the right thing. Daniel helped me carry my bag to the car. The morning sun made the driveway glow in soft light. As he placed my suitcase in the trunk, I could see the conflict written all over his face. "Mom, I don't want you to feel like you have to go." I reached out and touched his arm. "Oh, sweetheart," I said softly. "Sometimes love means knowing when to step aside. You and Emma need to build your own home, your own rhythm. I'll be fine." He hugged me tightly. For a moment, I felt like he was that little boy again, clinging to my apron strings, afraid to let go. When he finally pulled back, his eyes were misty. "Promise you'll call me every day?" I smiled. "Every single day." And with that, I climbed into the car. As I drove away, I didn't look back at the house right away. I waited until I turned the corner. Then I glanced in the mirror. The house looked small from a distance, quiet, almost peaceful. But to me, it wasn't just bricks and wood. It was memories, laughter, birthdays, and now, silence. My sister Rose greeted me at her doorstep with open arms. "Oh my goodness," she said, pulling me in. "You should have come sooner." Her home smelled like cinnamon and lavender. It felt warm, not fancy, but filled with comfort. That night, we sat on her porch with cups of tea, watching the stars. She asked gently, "So what really happened, Annie?" I smiled faintly. "Oh, time. People grow. Things change. And sometimes you realize love can't always live under the same roof." She nodded slowly. We didn't need to say more. She just held my hand. Over the next few weeks, Daniel called me every evening. He'd ask how I was settling in, if I was eating well, if I needed money. I'd always say, "I'm fine, dear. Don't worry about me." But every time he said goodbye, I could hear the guilt in his voice. I wanted to tell him not to carry it, but I knew guilt was part of learning to grow. Emma didn't call much. Once, she sent me a short message. "Hope you're doing well, Mom. The house feels quiet without you." It was kind. Maybe she meant it. Or maybe it was just something to say. Either way, I appreciated it. At night, I'd sit by my window and knit. Sometimes I'd imagine Daniel and Emma laughing over dinner, finally finding their peace. And I'd smile, even through the ache. About a month later, on a Sunday afternoon, I heard a car pull up outside my sister's house. When I looked through the window, my breath caught. It was Daniel. And Emma. I hurried to the door, heart racing. When I opened it, Daniel didn't say a word. He just wrapped me in a hug. This time it was him who was trembling. Emma stood behind him, eyes soft, face pale. "Mom," she said quietly, "we came to see you." I invited them in. The house smelled like freshly baked bread. Rose had been in the kitchen. We sat together, awkward at first. Then Emma spoke. "Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't realize how much you did. I was just overwhelmed. I didn't mean to make you feel unwelcome." Her voice cracked slightly. For a long moment, I said nothing. Then I reached across the table and took her hand. "It's all right, dear. You're learning, just like I'm learning how to let go." Tears filled her eyes. Daniel looked between us, relieved and sad all at once. We spent that afternoon talking. No accusations, no raised voices, just truth. I told her how hard it was to watch my son grow into his own family. She told me how hard it was to share her space while trying to find her rhythm as a wife. We both cried quietly, not from anger, but understanding. By sunset, something had softened. Not everything was fixed, but something fragile and important had begun to heal. When they left that evening, Emma hugged me for the first time. Really hugged me. And she whispered, "Please come visit soon." "Next time it'll feel different," I smiled. "I know it will." As I watched them drive away, I felt a strange peace settle over me. The kind that doesn't come from having things go your way, but from accepting life as it unfolds. The days after Daniel and Emma's visit passed slowly, like pages turning in a quiet book. For the first time in a long while, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. There was still sadness, yes. There were mornings I'd wake up expecting to hear Daniel's footsteps in the hall, or the sound of Emma making tea. But there was also something lighter inside me, a quiet acceptance. Sometimes healing doesn't look like joy. It looks like being able to breathe again without pain. At my sister's house, I began to create small routines. I would water the garden in the morning, the roses, the jasmine, the little herbs that grew by the fence. Then I'd sit by the kitchen window with my cup of tea, watching the light change through the trees. There was beauty in the simplicity. I didn't have to rush. I didn't have to fit into anyone else's rhythm. In the afternoons, Rose and I would cook together. Old recipes from our mother. We'd laugh as we tried to remember the right spices, tasting and adjusting as we went. Those moments reminded me of who I was before life became so complicated. Sometimes, when I stirred the soup or folded the laundry, I'd whisper to myself, "You're still here. You're still living. You still matter." And slowly, that truth began to sink in. A few weeks later, a letter arrived in the mail. It was from Emma. Her handwriting was neat, careful, every word written with intention. "Dear Mom," it began, "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about love and space. I realize now how much you held us together without even saying much. I miss you. I hope you'll come visit soon. Daniel and I are trying to make the house feel more like a home again. It's not the same without you." I read those lines over and over, not because they were perfect, but because they were honest. I wrote back that evening, "Dear Emma, thank you for your letter. It means more than you know. I'm glad you and Daniel are finding your way. I'll visit when the time feels right. For now, I'm learning to enjoy this quiet chapter, the one that belongs only to me." When I sealed the envelope, I felt a gentle calm settle inside me. It wasn't closure. It was connection, slowly mending itself. Months passed before I finally decided to visit them again. When I arrived, the house looked the same, but it felt different. There were flowers by the doorway, soft music playing inside. And when Emma opened the door, she smiled, truly smiled. "Welcome home, Mom," she said. The words caught me off guard. For a second, I couldn't speak. I just looked around, at the photos on the wall, the little touches of warmth everywhere. Daniel came in from the kitchen, grinning. "We've missed you," he said. We sat together for lunch. Nothing fancy, just soup and bread. But the air felt light. There was no tension, no hesitation, just shared laughter and gentle conversation. When Emma brought me a cup of tea, she said softly, "I hope you know you can always come back, but I also hope you keep living for yourself, too." Her words touched me deeply. She had grown, not just into a wife, but into someone who understood the balance between love and independence. I smiled. That's exactly what I planned to do. That night, after I returned to my sister's house, I stood by the window again. The moonlight was soft, silver, stretching across the quiet garden. I thought about all the years I had spent defining myself through others, as a wife, a mother, a helper. And now I was learning to define myself as simply me. It was strange at first, to not be needed every second. But then I realized, being needed and being loved aren't the same thing. Love doesn't vanish when you leave someone's home. It changes shape. It grows, just like people do. One Sunday, Rose and I went to the local park. Children were playing on the swings, couples walking hand in hand, old friends feeding birds by the pond. I sat on a bench, feeling the sunlight on my face. There was laughter around me, but inside there was stillness. Not emptiness, just stillness. A little girl ran past, chasing her dog, and for a second, I saw Daniel as a child again. His giggle, his tiny hands gripping mine, I smiled. Life really was a circle. You nurture, you let go, and one day, you're nurtured by peace instead of people that evening. I wrote one final letter, not to Daniel or Emma, but to myself. Dear Annie, you did your best. You loved, you tried, and when it hurt, you still chose kindness. You may have been asked to leave, but you didn't lose your home. Home lives in your heart, in every act of love you gave. You're allowed to rest now, and to live for yourself too. I placed the letter in my journal and closed it gently. It felt like saying goodbye to the pain, not with bitterness, but with grace. Weeks later, Rose and I decided to open a small bakery together. Something simple, just homemade bread, cookies, and tea cakes. It gave me purpose again. Every morning, I'd see familiar faces from the neighborhood, smiling, chatting, sharing little stories. And every so often, I'd catch myself thinking, if my husband could see me now, he'd smile too. One day, Daniel and Emma came by unexpectedly. They walked in, holding hands. Emma brought a basket of flowers. "For your shop," she said softly. I looked at them, their eyes bright, their smiles warm. And I realized the full circle had completed itself. We had all grown, separately yet together. That night, after closing the bakery, I sat by the window with my tea. The same spot, the same stars. I thought back to that painful morning when I left my own home with a suitcase and a trembling heart. Back then, I thought it was the end of everything I knew. But now, I understood something I hadn't then. Sometimes being told to leave isn't the end. It's an invitation to find yourself again. I smiled, whispering to the quiet night. Thank you, Emma. You didn't know it then, but you helped me begin again. And for the first time in years, I felt completely, beautifully free. It's been over a year now since that day. The day Emma said those words. You've stayed long enough. There was a time when those words echoed in my heart like a wound that refused to heal. But now when I think of them, they don't hurt anymore. They simply remind me of a chapter that needed to close, so a new one could begin. The little bakery my sister and I opened has become something of a local treasure. Children come in after school for warm cookies, and the older folks sit in the corner sipping tea, sharing old memories. There's laughter, soft music, and the smell of bread that fills every corner. Sometimes when I'm kneading dough, I think of the home I left behind, the mornings filled with clinking dishes, Daniel's laughter, Emma's voice humming in the kitchen, and I smile, not out of sadness but gratitude, because even though things changed, those moments still live inside me. They shaped me, taught me, and gave me the strength to stand on my own again. One afternoon, as the golden light poured through the bakery windows, I looked up and saw Daniel standing outside. He had that same boyish grin I remembered from when he was little. Mom, he said softly when he came in. You look happy. I am, I replied. I think I've finally found peace. He smiled, eyes shining. I'm glad. Emma and I talk about you all the time. We were wrong, you know. We thought we needed space, but what we really needed was understanding. I reached across the counter and took his hand. Son, life has a way of teaching us all differently. Don't hold on to guilt. Just love better next time. He nodded, eyes glistening, and for a long moment, neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. Sometimes silence says more than words ever could. Before he left, he said, Emma wants to visit soon. Maybe help you in the bakery? I laughed gently. She's welcome anytime. And I meant it, truly. Because forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting what happened. It means remembering it without bitterness. That night, after Daniel left, I sat by my window, the same spot where I've reflected so many times before. The moon hung high above the quiet town, and a cool breeze rustled the curtains. I opened my journal and wrote, Dear Emma, I used to think love meant always being needed. I used to think that if I wasn't in someone's home, I had lost my place in their heart. But I've learned something new. Love isn't about space, it's about grace. About letting people grow, even if that means growing away from you for a while. You didn't push me out of my home, dear. You pushed me toward myself, and for that, I will always be grateful. I never sent that letter. Some truths are not meant to be mailed, they're meant to be lived. These days, I wake up before sunrise. I open the bakery early, when the world is still wrapped in silence. I brew my tea, knead the dough, and let the morning light spill across the wooden counter. There's something healing about starting fresh every day, like life offering you one more gentle chance to begin again. Sometimes, when customers come in and smile, I see pieces of my own story in their faces. A woman who misses her mother, a man learning to forgive, a young girl trying to find her voice, and I realize that we all carry our own versions of you've stayed long enough. We all face moments where we're asked to move on, before we're ready. But maybe those moments aren't endings. Maybe they're invitations to rediscover who we are without needing anyone's permission. A few months later, Emma did visit the bakery. She looked nervous at first, holding a little bouquet of daisies. Hi, Mom, she said quietly. I thought I'd stop by. Maybe help for a bit? I smiled, wiping my hands on my apron. Of course. Come in. We spent the afternoon together, rolling dough, laughing at our messy attempts at icing. And in that small, flour-dusted kitchen, something healed between us that no words could fix. When she left that evening, she hugged me tight. "I never meant to hurt you," she whispered. "I know," I said softly. "Sometimes love doesn't know how to speak gently, but it learns." And as she drove away, I stood there smiling, not with pain, but with peace. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that love doesn't end when distance begins. It simply changes form. Sometimes it becomes a memory. Sometimes it becomes a letter never sent. And sometimes it becomes a warm loaf of bread shared across a kitchen table, years after the pain has passed. We spend so much of our lives holding on, to people, to homes, to roles we think define us. But maybe real strength is in knowing when to let go, not in anger, not in defeat, but with quiet understanding. Because sometimes, letting go is the kindest way to keep love alive tonight. As I close the bakery and watch the last light fade from the sky, I think back to the woman I was. The one who left her home with tears in her eyes and a suitcase in her hand. She thought she was losing everything, but she was really being given a gift. The gift of rediscovering herself. I pour myself one last cup of tea and whisper, "To new beginnings," even when they come disguised as endings. The kettle whistles softly. The air smells of bread and peace. And for the first time I realize I am finally home.